Why was she the only one awake before dawn, scrubbing floors while others slept? Why had the Navy, with all its hierarchy and rules, decided that brilliance belonged in a broom closet? Sarah Chun carried the bucket of cleaning supplies down the narrow steel corridor, her footsteps echoing softly against the metal deck. It was 0530. The ship still hummed in its half-sleep, a rhythm of engines, vents, and distant machinery. The USS Valiant, one of the Navy's most advanced destroyers, cut through calm waters under a rising sun, and Sarah, she descended into the belly of the vessel, the place where shadows lingered and recognition never reached. At 22, she stood barely 5'3", with a frame that made some crew whisper liability behind closed doors. Her uniform fit neatly, almost too neatly, as if the Navy had tailored it for someone they didn't expect to notice. She was Belgian-born, raised in a family that believed discipline could bend fate. At 16, she had come to America, hungry to serve, desperate to prove that strength wasn't measured in height or weight. She had been brilliant summa cum laude from MIT, dual degrees in mechanical and electrical engineering, 4 languages spoken fluently. She had scored in the 99th percentile on every Navy test they threw at her, and yet they gave her toilets. The irony bit at her every morning when she passed the engineering bay. Behind glass doors, she would hear Chief Rodriguez briefing recruits on propulsion systems. She had written her thesis on next-generation propulsion. She could have taught that briefing better than anyone in the room. And yet no one turned their head when she walked by. She slowed once, lingering by the weapons bay. A young seaman stumbled through a calibration sequence on the ship's defensive array. Sarah listened, silent, her mind already racing through the solution. She could fix it in half the time, but no one looked at her. No one asked, so she walked on, her bucket clinking faintly against her leg. The girl with the mop, the one who made the ship shine while everyone else carried the illusion of importance. Inside the first restroom, she bent to her task. The smell of industrial cleanser, the cold sting of metal, the water she wrung from rags, all of it belonged to her world now. She scrubbed with precision. Each fixture gleamed like polished silver when she finished. Sarah's discipline was relentless. If the Navy thought toilets would be her prison, then she would make them a cathedral. Still, her mind wandered. She thought of the radar glitches she had noticed days earlier. The communications lag no one seemed eager to fix. The coolant inefficiencies in the engine system that everyone dismissed as tolerable. She had solutions neat, clean, tested in her notebooks during late-night study sessions. But when she offered them, she was met with polite dismissal. Stick to the work you're qualified for. Words that cut sharper than steel. By the time she finished, sunlight streamed through a small porthole. She paused, staring at her reflection in the shining metal. A woman who looked small, almost fragile, stared back. But she knew something the others didn't. She wasn't fragile. She was sharpening herself in secret. Every night, when her sanitation duties ended, Sarah became someone else in her cramped quarters. She studied schematics, memorized emergency protocols, and built a library of knowledge no one asked for. She trained her body to hauling weights, crawling through ship passages, rehearsing for emergencies that might never come. The Navy saw a cleaner, but Sarah was building herself into a weapon of quiet resilience as she carried her supplies. To the next compartment, she glanced toward the command center inside. Commander Harrison stood tall among his senior staff, their voices low, their faces grave. Through the glass, she watched them outline the day's mission. Decisions, orders, strategy, the real work, work she might never touch. She whispered to herself as she walked past. Someday, she believed it. Someday, they would see what she could do. But that day was closer than she realized. The USS Valiant ran on rules as rigid as steel. At the top stood Commander James Harrison, a veteran with 20 years etched into the lines on his weathered face. Below him, A chain of command stretched downward like the ribs of the ship itself. Department heads, chiefs, petty officers, and enlisted personnel each had their place. Sarah had learned quickly where hers was. She was not in engineering, not in weapons, not in communications. She was support, the category reserved for cooks, clerks, and maintenance. Work that kept the ship running. Yes, but never the kind that earned medals or commendations. It wasn't just hierarchy. It was perception. She had overheard it in the mess hall. She's too small. Couldn't carry a man in combat. She's book smart, sure, but that's not the same as experience. She's none. Maybe enough. It wasn't cruel, just dismissive, casual. That was worse. She had chosen the Navy because she believed ships were floating machines, computers of steel and fire that valued brains over brute force. She had been wrong. On the USS Valiant, muscles mattered more than degrees. Her intellect was invisible. The days fell into rhythm. She cleaned. They ignored. She studied. They laughed. But sometimes, cracks appeared in the system. Cracks only she could see, like the coolant leak. She had spotted the hairline fracture in the secondary line weeks before the engineering team could diagnose it. She had even offered the solution: divert flow, replace the section, restore full efficiency in 4 hours. Petty Officer Morrison had waved her off. Leave it to the engineers. The ship limped at reduced power for a week before an outside consultant fixed it, exactly the way she had described. Then came the communications interference, a subtle static, a frequency conflict between radar and satellite signals. Sarah recognized the pattern instantly. Her mighty research had taught her that. She offered the fix, a 12-millisecond adjustment in phase timing. Lieutenant Chen smiled politely, dismissed it. 3 weeks later, another visiting engineer corrected it, exactly as Sarah had suggested. And the missile calibration, she warned Chief Williams of a targeting drift 23 degrees, enough to miss by hundreds of feet. He had cut her down in front of the team. Stick to toilets. During live fire exercises, the system failed. Investigation confirmed her numbers to the decimal. Each time she was right, each time she was ignored, and each time resentment thickened around her like a fog. Some sailors began to whisper, "Maybe she sees things others can't." Others muttered, "She's arrogant, out of line." Sarah was caught in the worst place. Too right to dismiss, too inconvenient to acknowledge. One evening, after another long day of being overlooked, she sat alone. In her quarters, her hands trembling as she held a reprimand letter. The words bled into her mind. Exceeding assigned duties. Inappropriate technical involvement. Her chest ached. She had joined the Navy to serve, to belong, to prove that brilliance wasn't bound by size or gender. And here she was, branded as insubordinate. For the first time, she considered quitting. But the thought passed. No, she would not give them that victory. If they denied her recognition, then she would prepare in silence. She would forge herself into someone undeniable. Nights became her sanctuary. She pored over technical schematics, memorized failure patterns, created emergency repair protocols no manual listed. She trained her body, practiced carrying loads through narrow corridors, rehearsed tasks under simulated exhaustion. She studied navigation, metallurgy, stress management, invisible leadership. She built herself into someone the Navy didn't believe existed. And no one noticed, not yet, but storms were brewing on the horizon, storms of steel, fire, and water. Soon the USS Valiant would face a crisis unlike any in its history. And when that day came, the woman they had caged inside a box, labeled support staff, would be the only one holding the key to survival. And Sarah Chun would be forced to decide if saving them was worth everything the Navy had stolen from her. Why did they call her into the commander's office with 2 chiefs at his side? Why did the air feel heavy like judgment was about to fall? Sarah sat stiffly in front of the desk. Commander Harrison's expression was carved from stone. Petty. Officer Morrison flipped through a thick folder her record. Chief Williams folded his arms, eyes sharp, waiting. Martinez, Harrison began, his voice low but final. You've been aboard the Valiant 8 months. Your sanitation work is adequate, but concerns have been raised. Concerns, the word struck harder than an insult. Sarah braced. Williams leaned forward, his tone a blade. Your habit of inserting yourself into technical matters, diagnosing problems, offering solutions. That ends now. Sarah forced her voice steady. Sir, I only wanted to help when I saw issues. Help? Morrison cut in, or second-guess trained specialists. Harrison's gaze didn't soften. Your sanitation, that's your role. These coincidences, your observations, don't change that. Education is an experience, and frankly, you lack the physical capability for anything beyond. What you're doing now, the words landed like steel weights. Too small, too fragile, too foreign. They were drawing her cage tighter with every sentence. Sir, with respect, size doesn't determine technical competence. Harrison shook his head. In theory, no. In practice, yes. This isn't MIT. It's a destroyer in contested waters. We need sailors who can haul equipment, crawl through fire, lift a man when it counts. That isn't you. Sarah's chest burned. She had trained her body night after night, hauling loads in silence. But they didn't see. They didn't want to. Williams delivered the final blow. Frankly, your persistence smells of arrogance. Or ego. Neither belongs here. The reprimand came swiftly. She was confined to her assigned role, forbidden from making suggestions, ordered to attend counseling with the chaplain. Chief Williams himself would monitor her compliance. She left. The room with the weight of iron pressing down. For the first time since joining, she wondered if the dream was already dead. But in the silence of her quarters that night, staring at the letter that branded her insubordinate, something shifted. She didn't quit. She sharpened. Her resolve hardened into steel. If they wouldn't give her a place, she would carve one silently. If they would not see her value, she would prepare until no crisis could hide it. And so, Sarah became relentless. By day, she cleaned, quiet, and compliant. By night, she built herself in secret. She studied every system aboard the Valiant, wiring diagrams, propulsion schematics, decades of maintenance records. She memorized failure patterns. She analyzed incidents from sister ships. She traced how malfunctions cascaded into disasters. She wrote notebooks full of flowcharts, troubleshooting maps, and alternative procedures no one else imagined. She trained her body harder, not for vanity, for function. Weighted drills, carrying loads down cramped passages, holding tools overhead until her muscles screamed. She pushed herself until she could endure any task they swore she couldn't. She studied navigation by stars. Because electronics could fail, she practiced crisis management through military histories, rehearsing in her mind how commanders saved lives or lost them. She mastered influence without authority, helping crews, subtly letting them take the credit. Invisible leadership. She even trained her mind. Stress control. Breathing under pressure. Thinking clearly in chaos. She prepared herself for the storm that might never come. To the Navy, she was a cleaner. To herself, she was becoming something else entirely. But secrecy has a cost, whispers spread. Her questions in casual conversations about navigation, about weapons, about propulsion began to unsettle others. Her anonymous notes slipped onto desks to solve problems, raise suspicion. It was Chief Williams who cornered her first. He slammed down a folder of handwritten notes onto his desk. Her handwriting, solutions she'd left in secret. Martinez, he growled. Want to explain why complex technical fixes appear right after you've cleaned those compartments? Sarah swallowed. I only wanted to help. Help? His voice rose. Or prove you're smarter than the rest of us. You sneak around like some kind of saboteur. That's not enough. His eyes were fire. Do you understand? How dangerous this looks. Her silence spoke for her. Then came the blow she hadn't expected. Morrison walked in, tablet in hand. "Chief, we have system logs. Martinez accessed advanced technical databases last night with her credentials." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Sir, those weren't classified. Open to all crew, not for sanitation staff." William shot back. "You pulled propulsion schematics, weapons calibration, emergency protocols? That's information gathering, Martinez. Looks like spying." The word hit like a strike to the chest. Spy. Her loyalty questioned. Her dedication twisted into suspicion. She tried to explain. Every skill she learned came from official manuals, from personal study, from a hunger to serve better. But the more she spoke, the more the room closed in to them. Her knowledge was evidence, her competence proof of guilt. Soon the whispers spread across the ship. Conversations died when she entered the mess. Eyes turned cold. Her roommate requested transfer. Even the few friends she had, like Rachel, another woman in support, distanced themselves for self-preservation. Her duties shifted too, away from technical spaces, away from the engine room. Communications bay, weapons systems. She was reassigned to quarters, laundry, food service. Physical work, draining, mindless, quarantine disguised as rotation. Her access to the library vanished. Her gym hours were revoked. A shadow followed her everywhere. Petty Officer Clark assigned to observe her, clipboard in hand, silence in his eyes. And Sarah. She carried the weight in silence. The isolation cut deeper than insults ever could. The Navy, the family she had chosen, turned cold and suspicious. Every skill she built in secret, every hour spent sharpening her edge, became ammunition against her. She was too prepared, too capable, and therefore, to them, too dangerous. Still, she endured. At night she whispered to herself, "If the moment comes, I'll be ready. I won't waste what I've built." And storms, after all, never ask permission before they arrive. Her reckoning began one gray morning in October. The USS Valiant patrolled international waters near the Korean peninsula. Seas restless, skies dim. Sarah sat confined to her quarters when the alarm ripped through the corridors. The general quarters klaxon screamed. Boots thundered past. Her door. The captain's voice cut through the speakers. "All hands, distress call received. Cargo vessel, Bright Fortune, 40 nautical miles northeast, taking on water, engines dead, heavy seas. We are moving to assist." Sarah pressed her face to the porthole. Outside, whitecaps clawed at the horizon. The storm was coming fast. She heard the urgency in every voice overcomes. Engines pushed to maximum. Stress rising in the drive shaft, communications faltering, rescue boats preparing. And she knew before anyone admitted it that the Valiant herself was straining. Too much speed, too much stress. Vibrations rippled through the hull. Power flickered in her room. Failures were stacking like dominoes. The irony cut deep. She had trained for this. Nights spent mapping cascading failures, studying emergency protocols, rehearsing integrated solutions. She knew what to do. She could save them, but she was locked in her room. 300 lives aboard, 23 on the Bright Fortune, and Sarah Chun, the one person who understood how the ship's failing systems intertwined, sat behind a locked steel door, her fists pressed to the metal, heart pounding. What is loyalty, she thought, if it can't break chains? And outside, the storm grew darker. Why was the ship trembling beneath her boots like a living thing in pain? Why did the lights flicker as though the Valiant herself was afraid? Sarah felt it through the floor of her confined quarters. The vibration was wrong, too uneven, too desperate. She knew what it meant before anyone said the words aloud. The main drive shaft was failing. The speakers crackled. Chief Rodriguez's voice carried strain. "Bridge, this is engineering. Stress readings on the main drive shaft critical. Recommend reducing speed immediately." The captain's reply came fast. Negative, maintain course. We need to reach the distress site before seas worsen. Sarah closed her eyes. She could already see the math unraveling. Maintain this strain, and the shaft bearings would seize. Lose propulsion, and they would drift helplessly dead in the water with a sinking cargo ship beside them. Her fists clenched on her bunk. She had written this scenario in her notebooks. She had trained for this exact chain of failures, and yet she sat useless, locked away because they feared the very knowledge that could save them. Minutes stretched. Then the voice of communications broke through. Clipped and urgent. Bridge. This is communications. We've lost stable link with the Bright Fortune. Weather interference, we're on our own. Through her porthole, Sarah caught sight of the cargo vessel at last, its silhouette tilting against the horizon. Listing, dying. Bridge. Visual contact confirmed. Vessel listing 15 degrees starboard. Settling stern. Crew preparing to abandon ship. 23 souls on board. The storm had risen to 20-foot waves. Winds howled against steel. Sarah pressed her forehead against the glass. She could see the rescue boats lowering. Brave sailors strapped in. Engines fighting against angry water. Each second mattered. Each system failure aboard the Valiant made success less likely. Then it came, the transmission she dreaded. Bridge. This is engineering. Main drive shaft bearing temperature critical. Failure imminent. Recommend immediate engine shutdown. Negative, the captain snapped. We cannot reduce power during rescue. Sir, if we don't maintain engines, find another solution. But there was no other solution. Not with their thinking, not within the narrow frame of procedures the Navy drilled into them. Sarah's breath caught. Her body shook with the urge to act, to shout, to break through the door. She could solve it. She knew how to balance electrical loads, reroute propulsion stress, shut down systems strategically, engage thrusters for station keeping. She had mapped it all. She had trained for this. But her door remained locked. Her ears rang with the alarm for flooding. All hands. Flooding reported in compartments C3 and C4. Emergency teams respond. Sarah's pulse quickened. Those compartments house critical electrical and pumping systems. If water swallowed them, the Valiant would lose its ability to fight the sea. She gripped the edge of her bunk, whispering into the noise. It's the shaft vibrations. They're tearing the hull. Shut it down. Break it. Use the thrusters, please, God. Someone see it. Outside her door, voices shouted past. Boots pounded the corridor. We can't hold her. Water's rising. One voice, louder, cracked with desperation. We need someone who understands how all these systems tie together. Sarah froze. Someone out there knew. Someone had seen her hidden brilliance. But another voice answered, low and fearful. She's confined. Suspicion. We can't ask her. Her heart splintered. Even in the jaws of catastrophe, suspicion outweighed survival. Her palms slammed against the steel door. Guard! She shouted. Clark! Get me to the commander. I know how to stop this. Footsteps approached. The guard's voice was weary. Martinez, stay quiet. Orders are orders. Orders? Her voice cracked. When this ship goes dark, when 300 lives drown, will you say you followed orders? The footsteps retreated. Silence swallowed her. Then Chief Williams arrived. His voice cut through the door like a whip. Martinez, cease this behavior. You are confined for a reason. Her chest heaved. Chief, listen to me. The shaft is causing harmonic vibrations, tearing the hull near those flooded compartments. Engage emergency braking, shift to bow thrusters, rotate power loads. You'll stabilize. Silence. She pushed harder. Chief, backup generators are overheating because they're carrying full load. You'll lose them in 15 minutes. Then navigation, communications, pumps gone, dead in the water. Williams barked a laugh, though it held no humor. How would you know that timing? Unless you had knowledge you shouldn't. Because I studied. Because I understand this ship better than anyone. And because I am right. His reply came cold. Or because you're manipulating a crisis to gain access to systems you shouldn't touch. Sabotage disguised as genius. Her breath caught sabotage. The accusation wrapped around her throat like a noose. Chief, for God's sake, I live here too. I sink with you. I'm not your enemy. I'm your only chance. But his footsteps retreated, and Sarah knew hierarchy had become a blindfold that no crisis could rip away. The PA crackled again. Bridge, this is engineering. Backup generator 2 failing, overheating. 30 minutes until full power loss. Sarah whispered into the stale air. 23 on that ship. 300 here. You don't have 30 minutes. You have 10. Our hands trembled, not with fear, with fury. Fury that knowledge was treated as danger. That competence was painted as betrayal. That loyalty, proven in silence, was shackled by suspicion. Through the glass of her porthole, she saw the rescue boats battling monstrous waves. She saw sailors risk their lives to haul strangers from a sinking vessel. She saw her shipper home dying under the weight of its own blindness. She pressed her palms to the glass. The storm raged, the steel groaned, the clock ticked, and Sarah Chun faced the cruelest truth of her life. The moment she had trained for, prayed for, sharpened herself for had come, but she was still on the wrong side of a locked door. Why was the sound of silence worse than alarms? Why did the absence of trust weigh heavier than the storm itself? Sarah stood in her small quarters, the steel door sealed tight, her reflection caught in the darkened glass of the porthole. The ship shuddered beneath her feet, vibrations rolling like tremors in the earth. She could almost feel the bolts loosening, the systems failing one by one. Then the announcement came. Voice heavy with resignation. All hands. The captain's voice echoed through the speakers. Prepare lifeboats for possible evacuation of non-essential personnel. This is not a drill. Sarah froze. Lifeboats in these seas? It was suicide. Heavy swells would smash small craft like toys. Hundreds could die before the first boat cleared the ship. Her chest heaved. Her mind screamed. They're giving up. They're abandoning the ship because they can't see past there. Rules. Her fists hammered the door. Clark. Chief Williams. Commander Harrison. Listen to me. Abandonment will kill more than it saves. But the corridor outside remained cold. Footsteps passing. No answer. The ship lurched. Sarah staggered, clutching the wall. Through the porthole, she saw the rescue boats, tossed like corks, fighting the furious sea to reach the bright fortune. The cargo vessel groaned, its bow lifting and crashing with waves, its crew clinging desperately to railings, and all the while, the Valiant's lights flickered weaker, power bleeding away. Engines silent, a warship reduced to a candle in a hurricane. Sarah's voice cracked as she whispered into the silence. I trained for this. I can stop this. I can save you. Why won't you let me? The answer came in her memory. Commander Harrison's voice. You're too small, too far, and too untested. Education isn't experience. Every word had built the walls around her. Every dismissal had become the lock on her door. But now? The walls weren't just holding her. They were suffocating everyone aboard. She heard chaos through the speakers. Engineering's voice, high with panic. Bridge. Generator 1 showing critical heat. 30 seconds to overload. Shut it down. If we shut it down, sir, we lose everything. The captain's silence stretched. A silence thick with fear. Sarah looked at her watch. She had been right. To the minute. 15 seconds later, the lights died. Darkness swallowed. Her quarters. Only the storm's howl remained, pressing against steel, seeping into every corner. The backup batteries flickered dim, red emergency lights casting shadows on the walls. The hum of machinery was gone. The mighty Valiant, defender of seas, was blind, deaf, powerless. Sarah sank to her knees, her forehead pressed against the cold. Door, she whispered. This is how 300 lives end. Not in fire, not in combat, but in blindness. Her breath slowed, her heartbeat steadied. Something inside her shifted. She stood, her decision already made. If they wouldn't open the door, she would. Disobedience, insubordination, court-martial, none of it mattered if the ship didn't survive the next hour. She pulled the hairpin from her braid. Simple, slender, steel. She had studied more than systems. She had studied locks. Nights spent teaching herself because she knew someday her survival might depend on it. Her hands worked fast, precise. She could hear the storm battering steel. The chaos of boots running, orders shouted, voices breaking. She felt the tumblers click, one by one, until the door gave way with a soft metallic snap. Freedom, but not triumph, because stepping into that corridor meant stepping into war. Not against an enemy fleet, but against the very institution she had sworn to serve. She tightened her fists, whispering to herself, "This isn't betrayal. This is loyalty, the kind that saves lives." The corridor stretched before her dim-red, lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Sailors rushed past, too focused on survival to notice her shadow joining theirs. Sarah moved fast, not toward safety, toward the storm's heart, the failing systems deep inside the Valiant. Every step carried a weight heavier than chains. She wasn't just breaking confinement, she was breaking trust. If she failed, she would be remembered as a traitor. But if she succeeded, no one would forget. Her mind sharpened into calm calculation. Systems she had memorized unfolded in her head like a map. She knew exactly where to go. The ship groaned, water hammering her hull. Somewhere above, a sailor screamed as a wave swept across the deck. Somewhere below, water flooded steel compartments, and in between, Sarah moved, one small figure defying the blindness of an entire chain of command. Her thoughts were quiet, but her heart thundered with a truth she could no longer silence. Sometimes obedience kills. Sometimes survival demands defiance. And as she descended the ladder toward the heart of the Valiant, Sarah Chun prepared to gamble everything, her career, her name, her freedom, against the storm that threatened to drown them all. Why were sailors staring at her as if she were a ghost? Why did their eyes widen in the red glow of emergency lights, as though seeing someone they weren't supposed to see? Sarah moved quickly through the corridor, boots steady, hair damp from the condensation that clung to the steel walls. The storm roared outside, waves slamming against the hull with a violence that rattled her bones. She passed clusters of sailors wrestling with hoses, dragging equipment, shouting into dead radios. No one stopped her. No one had the time. Desperation blurred protocol. But when she reached the door to engineering, she found the first wall of resistance. Chief Williams stood there, jaw tight, sweat running down his temple despite the cold. He blocked the entrance like a guard dog, clipboard gone, wrench in hand. His eyes narrowed. Martinez. His voice dripped with accusation. "You broke confinement." Sarah didn't flinch. "The ship's dead. Chief, you know it. Backup power's gone. Flooding's rising. You've got minutes before this hull starts tearing apart." His jaw clenched. "You're under investigation. You're not authorized to be here." Sarah stepped closer, her voice low, steady. "Authorization doesn't matter if we sink. You need me. You know it." Behind him, chaos raged. Engineers scrambled over panels, alarms blaring weakly as systems failed in cascades. Chief Rodriguez barked orders, his usually confident tone edged with panic. Williams stood firm, but doubt flickered in his eyes. "Even if you know something, you're still a liability." Sarah's voice sharpened. "A liability who warned you about coolant leaks, communications lag, and missile drift. Every time I was right, and every time you ignored me. Look where that got you." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them, only the ship's groans and the storm outside. Then a voice from within engineering cut through. Chief Rodriguez, strained and desperate. "Williams, what the hell are you doing? We need every hand." Williams turned torn. Sarah seized the opening, slipping past him into the heat and chaos of engineering. The air was thick, heavy with oil and sweat. Emergency lights flickered weak red across panels that sputtered with warning indicators. The roar of seawater surging into lower compartments vibrated through the deck plates. Rodriguez turned to her, surprise flashing across his face. "Martinez? What the—" "No time." Sarah cut him off. "Your shaft seized. Vibrations are tearing compartments C3 and C4. Flooding will take down your pumps. You've got one shot before we lose this ship." The room stilled for a moment. Engineers glanced at one another, their exhaustion written in pale faces and trembling hands. They had tried everything they knew. Nothing worked. Rodriguez's voice was tight. "And what's your solution?" Sarah stepped to the main schematic panel, her hand tracing the systems she had memorized 100 nights in her quarters. Her voice came calm, deliberate, steady despite the storm. "Engage the emergency braking system on the main drive shaft. Stop the vibrations, then reroute propulsion control to both thrusters for station keeping. That stabilizes us long enough to redistribute power." Rodriguez frowned. "Braking the shaft risks damage." Sarah met his eyes. "We're all ready." "Damaged. Keep running it, and we crack the hull wide open." Silence again. Then she pressed on. "Next, your backup generators are overheating because they're carrying full load. You can't keep them both running. Shut one down. Rotate the load between them every 10 minutes. By cooling time, you'll maintain essential power without burning them out." One of the engineers scoffed. "That's not in protocol." Sarah's eyes flashed. "Protocol won't save you. Adaptation will." She pointed to the schematic again. "Shut down non-essentials. Lighting, heating. Every ounce goes to pumps, coms, and thrusters. Then patch the water flow in C3 and C4 by rerouting through unused compartments. I can show you how." Rodriguez's face tightened. His pride warred with reality, but he wasn't blind. He had seen her warnings come true before, and now? She was giving him answers no one else had. "Can you implement this?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded once. "Yes." William stepped in, his voice a growl. "You trust her now? After everything?" Rodriguez's gaze didn't leave Sarah's. "I trust results, and right now, she's the only one giving me any." For the first time since she boarded the Valiant, someone had said it aloud. Trust. Sarah swallowed the lump. In her throat, she couldn't afford pride. Not now. She rolled up her sleeves. Moving to the panels, her fingers flew, rerouting systems, calling out commands to stunned engineers who obeyed before they realized they were taking orders from the girl who scrubbed their toilets. The ship groaned again as the emergency brake engaged on the shaft. A violent shudder ran through the deck plates. Then, suddenly, the sickening vibrations eased. Rodriguez's eyes widened. She was right. Sarah didn't pause. "Rotate generators now. Kill lighting and non-essentials. Transfer power to pumps." Around her, the engineers scrambled, following instructions that felt alien but necessary. The pumps roared to life again, stronger, fighting back the seawater that had threatened to swallow compartments whole. A sailor shouted from across the room, "Flooding slowing." Sarah's chest tightened, relief mixing with urgency. "Good. Now, reroute flow around C3. That'll relieve pressure. You need a welder on the starboard panel. Lower bulkhead now." Williams glared at her, his voice low. "You think one wind changes anything? You're still out of line, still dangerous." Sarah met his eyes, her tone even. "If being dangerous keeps this ship alive, then yes, I am." The storm screamed, the ship groaned, but for the first time in hours, there was a spark of hope inside the USS Valiant, because Sarah Chun was no longer silent. She was leading. Why did the ship suddenly feel alive again? as though gasping a final breath. Why did hope return so quickly, only to teeter on the edge of collapse? Sarah's commands echoed through engineering, her voice cutting through panic like a knife. Rotate generators now, 10 minutes each. Keep them cool, no hesitation. Hands flew over panels. Switches clacked. Lights dimmed further as non-essential systems fell dark. Red emergency glow bathed the room. It felt like the heartbeat of a dying beast weak. Fragile, but still present. Then came the report from the pumps. Chief, water levels in C3 and C4 stabilizing. Rising slower, Rodriguez let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding. His shoulders dropped, just slightly, around them. Engineers exchanged looks, hope mixing with disbelief. But Chief Williams wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, voice low but sharp. You're gambling. With untested procedures. If this fails, we all die. And if it works, what then? You expect commendations? A medal? You broke orders, Martinez. Sarah didn't look at him. Her hands kept moving across the schematics. I don't expect anything, except survival. The ship groaned under another massive wave. The floor pitched, sending tools clattering. A pipe burst in the corner, spraying steam. Engineers cursed, moving to patch it. Rodriguez turned to her again. If we follow this, what next? Sarah's eyes flicked to the schematics, her voice calm despite the storm. Next, you'll lose generator 2 again. Overheating, coolant's insufficient in these seas. We need to improvise additional cooling. Rodriguez frowned. Improvise. How? Sarah pointed to the flooding systems. We're pumping seawater out. Divert part of that flow through an auxiliary line to wrap the generator housing. Crude, but effective. It'll buy you time. An engineer blinked. You want us to cool the generator with salt water? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. It'll corrode long-term, but we don't need long-term. We need an hour, maybe 2. Rodriguez studied her, then barked. Do it. The team scattered, hauling hoses, splicing lines. Williams stared. His face twisted with contempt. This is madness. You're risking catastrophic failure. Sarah turned, her voice suddenly fierce. Failure is already here, Chief. You just refuse to see it. For a moment, silence. The storm outside roared, but inside, no one spoke. Because they knew she was right, a sailor burst in, soaked, eyes wide. Flooding spreading faster in starboard compartments. Pumps can't keep up. Sarah's mind raced. She grabbed a grease pencil, sketching on the nearest panel. Seal C5 completely. Sacrifice it. Focus pumping power on C3 and C4. Contain the spread. It's triage. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. We'll lose everything in C5. Better one compartment than the ship. Sarah snapped. Rodriguez hesitated, then nodded sharply. Seal it. The order flew across the room. Sailors sprinted, sealing hatches, locking steel doors against. Rising water. The sound of metal grinding shut carried a weight heavier than the storm, because inside those compartments, some equipment and maybe someone's personal belongings would be lost forever. A necessary sacrifice. Williams leaned closer, voice low and bitter. Funny how quick you are to sacrifice. Makes me wonder whose side you're really on. Sarah turned, eyes blazing. I'm on the side that survives. For a moment, he looked at her, not as a subordinate, not as a cleaner, but as something else entirely, something he didn't want to name. Then the ship lurched again, a violent shudder. Panels sparked, an engineer shouted, "Port side pumps offline." Sarah scanned the schematics, her mind racing. Too many failures, too fast. She had trained for cascading breakdowns, but reality moved faster than any simulation. Her throat tightened. She could feel it, the edges of control slipping away. Am I enough? The question screamed inside her. Have I prepared enough? Or was I only pretending, lying to myself while the real storm laughed at me? Her hands trembled for the first time. a crack in her composure. She had fought so hard to be perfect, to be undeniable, but here, in the heart of chaos, perfection was impossible. She closed her eyes for one beat, steadying her breath. Then her voice returned firm, sharp. Bypass portside pumps, reroute through emergency lines in the lower deck. Use manual valves if you have to. An engineer hesitated. That's a three-man job, and we're stretched thin. I'll do it, Sarah said, already moving. Williams blocked her path. You're not authorized. She glared at him. Fire. In her eyes, neither is drowning. She shoved past him, sprinting down the ladder into the lower deck. The air grew hotter, wetter. Water sloshed around her boots. Rising fast, steam hissed from pipes. Alarms wailed faintly above the roar of the storm. She reached the valve wheel, straining against it. Her muscles screamed. The wheel resisted. Corroded and stiff, her mind flashed back to Morrison's words. Too small, too weak. She gritted her teeth, fury burning through her arms. Not too small, she hissed. Not today. She threw her entire body weight into the wheel. Slowly, painfully, it turned. Metal groaned. Water surged, redirected into the emergency line. Above, she heard a shout, flow restored. Pumps back online. Sarah collapsed against the bulkhead, chest heaving, arms shaking. Salt water soaked her boots, sweat burned her eyes. But she smiled, a small, fierce smile. Because she had done it, she dragged herself back up the ladder, returning. To engineering, eyes followed her engineers, sailors, even Rodriguez. For the first time, respect flickered in their faces. But William's glare cut through it, his voice low, venomous. Heroics don't erase the fact you're a security risk. Don't think this changes anything. Sarah met his gaze, voice quiet but razor sharp. It changes everything. Ship groaned again. The storm still raged. But for the first time, the USS Valiant was fighting back and winning one breath at a time. And at its center was the woman they had dismissed, ignored, confined. Sarah Chun was no longer the girl with the mop. She was the one holding the ship together. Why did the bridge fall silent when she entered? Dripping seawater, streaked with grease, her uniform torn at the sleeve. Why did hardened officers stare as though they were seeing a ghost rise from the storm? Sarah had climbed from engineering, her body aching, her lungs raw with the salt and steam air. She had just forced open valves with her bare hands to keep the ship alive, and now she stood at the threshold of command. The door hissed shut behind her. Commander Harrison turned, his face gray, his voice hoarse. Martinez, you're supposed to be confined. The bridge crew froze, all eyes fixed on her in their silence. She felt the unspoken truth. They all knew the ship was dying. She steadied her voice, calm, controlled, but every syllable carried the storm she'd walked through. Sir, confinement doesn't matter anymore. What matters is survival, and you're losing this ship. Harrison's jaw tightened. You. Forget your place. Sarah took one step forward, her boots leaving saltwater prints on the deck. My place is wherever this ship survives. And right now, that place is here. The air crackled with tension. Officers shifted uncomfortably. Torn between hierarchy and hope, Lieutenant Chun broke the silence. Sir, with respect. Engineering stabilized because of her. We'd already lost control. She gave us time. Harrison's eyes cut to him. Fury, but also fear. His authority cracked under the weight of truth. Sarah didn't pause. She pressed. You've ordered lifeboats in seas like this. That's not rescue. That's execution. Keep people aboard. Let me finish stabilizing the Valiant. It's the only chance. Harrison's voice hardened. You expect me to hand command of my ship to a... He stopped himself, but the word hung unspoken. A cleaner, a foreigner, a girl too small for. Or, Sarah felt the sting. She let it hang. Then her voice dropped, steady and cutting. No, sir. I don't expect you to hand me anything, But if you keep making the same choices, 300 people will drown tonight. You know it? I know it. Her eyes swept the room. Officers avoided her gaze, because deep down, they felt it too. The weight of impending doom. For a moment, Harrison said nothing. His hands gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. Then, with a voice trembling at the edges, he muttered, "What would you do?" The bridge leaned in. The storm outside roared, but inside, silence reigned. Sarah took another step forward. Her voice was low, deliberate. "Engage full ballast adjustments. Use flooding compartments to counterbalance the storm instead of fighting. It turned the ship into a stabilizer, not a victim. Rebalance every 15 minutes. I'll handle the math." The navigator frowned. "That's experimental, unstable." Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "So is drowning," she continued, pointing to the radar console. "Radar's intermittent because of interference between frequencies. Shift the timing phase by 12 milliseconds. Clear the signal. You'll regain full comms." Communications blinked. "That's not in the manual." Sarah's voice sharpened. "Neither is survival in seas like this." Her final words landed like an anchor. "You don't need a manual. You need someone who sees the ship as a whole." "That's me." Harrison stared at her. His face warred between pride and desperation. Commanders were trained to never yield authority. But here he was, a breath away from watching his ship sink. Finally, he whispered, "If you're wrong." Sarah finished the thought for him. "Then I'll go down with you, like everyone else." Silence. Then, slowly, he nodded. The room shifted. Relief, urgency, fear, but also a spark hope reigniting in exhausted eyes. Sarah moved fast, sliding into the navigation station, her hands moving with precision. "Adjust ballast now. Starboard first. Then, port. Keep balance within 2 degrees. Orders flew across the bridge. Her voice leading them, officers moved, sailors obeyed. The crew, responding not to rank, but to certainty. Within minutes, the Valiant steadied. The violent roll of the ship softened. The storm's assault absorbed by steel that finally bent with it instead of against it. Communications shouted, "Signal clear. We have full link with the Bright Fortune again." Cheers erupted, ragged but real. For the first time, victory felt possible. Harrison watched it all unfold, his eyes locked on Sarah. She had taken his bridge without raising her voice, without demanding power. She had done it by being the only one who refused to give up. But William's voice, bitter, broke through. "Sir, you can't let this stand. She's under my command. She's a threat to order." The bridge went silent again. All eyes turned back to Harrison. The storm outside raged, but the real battle was here, in this moment. Would command cling to pride? Or would it yield to survival? Harrison's gaze lingered on Sarah. He saw the grease on her arms, the salt water staining her boots, the fire in her eyes. And perhaps, for the first time, he saw her not as a cleaner, not as an outsider, but as what she had always been. Sailor ready to carry the weight no one else could. He exhaled slowly. "Martinez, continue." The words hung like thunder. William's face darkened, but no one followed him. The bridge turned back to their stations, obeying Sarah's voice. Her instructions, her vision, Sarah pressed forward, working the systems, calling out commands with steady precision. Each adjustment stabilized the Valiant further. Each order pushed them closer to survival. And in the storm's heart, she realized this wasn't about recognition anymore. It wasn't about proving herself right. It was about life, about loyalty, about carrying others when no one carried her. Her hands flew, her voice guided, her heart steadied, and the USS Valiant began to live again. Why was the morning so quiet after the night had screamed with thunder? Why did survival feel heavier than death? The storm had broken at dawn. The seas, once towering monsters, rolled like restless giants finally retreating. The Valiant creaked and groaned, battered but afloat. Smoke trailed from her stacks. Salt water dripped from every seam. She looked less like a warship now, more like a survivor. And so did her crew. Exhausted faces lined the deck. Sailors slumped against bulkheads. Boots soaked, hands raw. They had fought all night. They had not won against the storm. But neither had they been defeated. They lived. Sarah stood apart, leaning against the rail. Her arms ached. Her uniform was stiff with dried salt. Her eyes burned from sleeplessness. But she stood tall, her gaze steady on the horizon behind her. Voices murmured, whispers carried in the morning air. That's her. She kept us afloat. Martinez? The one who, she saved the Valiant. Not loud, not official. Just the quiet acknowledgement of those who had seen her in the heart of the storm. Chief Williams passed her, his glare unchanged, his words low and sharp. Don't mistake survival for victory. You broke orders, you undermined command. There will be consequences. Sarah didn't answer because she knew he was right. The Navy wasn't built to reward disobedience, even when disobedience saved lives. But then Rodriguez approached, exhaustion in his eyes, respect in his voice. You gave us time, Martinez. Without you, I don't think we'd be standing here. Sarah nodded once. No pride, no victory. Just truth later. She was summoned to the captain's quarters. Commander Harrison sat behind his desk, his face pale, his hands folded. The man who had once told her she was too small, too weak, too foreign to matter, now looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. Martinez, he began, voice gravelly with fatigue. You disobeyed direct orders. You left confinement. You seized control of systems without authorization. These are grave offenses. She said nothing. She didn't plead. She didn't defend. She had lived her defense in the storm. He leaned back, his eyes distant. But the fact remains, you saved this ship. Your solutions worked when ours failed. You saw connections no one else did. And because of that, 300 sailors are alive. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Harrison sighed. There will be inquiries, reports, questions from command. Some will want you punished. Some will call you reckless. Some will call you a hero. His eyes met hers. I can't decide which one you are. Sarah's voice was steady, quiet. I'm neither, sir. I'm just someone who refused to sink. For a long moment, Harrison studied her. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Dismissed. She saluted, turned and left, on her way out. She passed sailors in the corridor. Some avoided her eyes. Some nodded subtly. A flicker of respect they dared not voice aloud. Recognition in silence. That night, she stood alone on the deck. The sea stretched calm and endless, as though it had never raged at all. Stars broke through the clearing sky. Her body trembled not from cold, but from release. Every muscle that had fought through the storm now surrendered to stillness. Her mind replayed the night's choices, the faces, the screams, the silence after each system failed. She thought of the bright fortune, its crew rescued, alive, because the Valiant had stood long enough to save them. She thought of the compartments sealed, the equipment lost, the lines blurred between sacrifice and survival. And she thought of herself, Sarah Chun, once the girl who scrubbed toilets, now the woman who had carried a ship through the storm, but she didn't feel like a hero. She felt human, broken in places, stronger in others, and forever changed. Her eyes lifted to the horizon. The Navy might never honor her. The reports might paint her as reckless, insubordinate, dangerous. History might forget her name. But she knew the truth, and so did every sailor who had stood in the storm with her. Sometimes loyalty doesn't look like obedience. Sometimes strength is silent until the moment it cannot be. Sometimes survival requires a single person to stand against the tide. Even if it means standing alone, she closed her eyes. The wind, cool on her face, and in that quiet dawn, one truth settled in her chest like an anchor calm. Heavy, unshakable. Sometimes Dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.